So thank you, and good, we're still in morning, so good morning. It's very good to see you. Thank you so much, Janara, for having me here. It's rare, actually, that I get to do anything local. And so just being able to scoot over 20 minutes is so much better than, getting on a plane and getting too far away. And I was, doing what we do, which is like figuring out, like, what am I going to say here? And somehow, this is the way the internet works. You get on the internet, you think you're going to do one thing, and eventually, like, you're someplace else. So eventually, I ended up on Goodreads. And, Goodreads is where people leave a lot of comments about books and things. And my most recent book, I'm actually coming up on almost the third, we're about 2.5 years in. We'll have our third anniversary in June for Radical Dharma, Talking Race, Love, and Liberation. And I usually don't spend time, because one wants to be sane, looking at comments. And in the age of social, everybody has to have a comment, pretty much about everything, and definitely about books. And it had me reflecting on the journey that I have had with this work, as I have often, come to realize and think about a lot these days. When I started out to do the book, Radical Dharma, I thought, like, oh, this is my work. Like, I'm going to do something. Lama Rod, I'm a co-author with a fellow named Lama Rod Owens, who's an amazing human being. And Lama, black queer man, a Lama in the Tibetan tradition, and also scholar Dr. Yasmin Saidullah. And so we entered this thing thinking we were doing something. And, that has lived with me a lot. Like, this is my work. I even did like a session with someone and said, how am I going to focus my time and energy? And then I realized that because Radical Dharma came out of, my decades of experience, all of my observations, the things that I think are important, but even more importantly, the things that seem to be coming. So this is 3 years ago, right? 3 years ago, when we started the book 4 years ago, we didn't know what kind of political reality we would be entering into. But we did know that we were going to have the loss of the first black president, and so we were vibing on that. We were vibing on the importance of having a conversation about race, because it occurred to us that actually we have never had a conversation about race in this country. We've had conversations about policies, and we've had movements, but we've never had actually conversations about race, and that this is one of the things that was a challenge. So fast forward, as I'm reading these comments, one of the things that someone says is, well, they call this book Radical Dharma, but I don't understand what's so radical about it. And I thought to myself, time for a reframe. And rather than thinking about it as like this is some kind of assault, but for me to really think through, how do I come back and share with people what is radical about Dharma, the way that I'm talking about it in that book. So that's sort of living with me, and I realized that thinking through it as I went around looking for something and ending up here, that actually it responded to the question that I had, is what I wanted to talk about. It is really about how we go about thinking about how we reframe the world that we've received, the lives that we've received. How do we reframe, in the way that Janara was talking about, the definitions that have been handed to us, the boxes we've been put in, the categories that we live under, the expectations that all of us are frankly bearing the weight of without even understanding whether those expectations actually belong to us or not. And that was my journey through Dharma, and really my journey to uncovering what I think of as radical Dharma. Like, how do I use this notion of not just the historic classic set of teachings that come from the historic Buddha that we call capital D Dharma, but how do we use this as a lone phrase, a lone idea and add it into the lexicon of the way that we think about everything that we're doing and everything that we're up to in this time of undoing and unpacking and reclaiming and re-understanding all of the myths and stories and things that we carry. So out of that process, I realized that this thing that I thought was my work, this thing that we thought was our work, that I have become its work, that I have become the work of Radical Dharma, and that what I do and what I endeavor to do is try to live into that notion of Radical Dharma. So to talk about that, I'll say a little bit about what we think about Radical Dharma as beyond the classic set of teachings of the historic Buddha, is that Dharma in many, which is, you know, fantastic, because in the English language we have, like, you know, 2-3 meanings for any given word. The word Dharma has, you know, at least 15, depending on who you're asking. And the ones that kind of rise to the top for me are universal truth, but also one's own path, right? So it's simultaneously what is universal as a truth and what is one's individual singular truth. And how do we find and live and understand the sweet spot in between those two places? For me, that's like everything. That's like everything. To both be able to recognize that in some ways we all have to abide by universal truths. We all have to abide by Dharma, the truth of old age, sickness, death, suffering, that we experience suffering, that life is a culmination of lots of moments of discomfort, dis-ease, but also of joy and possibility and endless opportunities for liberation. And that the way that we come to that, interestingly and paradoxically enough, is not by trying to figure out some uniform set of rules, categories, descriptions by which we abide, but rather to emerge into an understanding of what is my particular truth. I don't mean, you know, fake news, but I mean my particular unique truth and my individual expression. And how do I communicate my individual unique expression in the face of the sets of fixed ideas and truths that other people would have us try to live into in order to commit the thing that is most orderly, called life, into some vain sense of orderliness, right? When actually everything is in a constant state of chaos, including ourselves. So I'm working through this as a lived way of being. And not too long ago, I was giving a talk on mindfulness, and it is well understood that the term that we use, mindfulness, that Jon Kabat-Zinn coined as a phrase, actually comes from a Pali word that is sati, or a Sanskrit word, smriti, and they mean to remember, right, or to recollect, or more distinctly, to recollect in relationship to what matters. That is to understand and to remember what is important, what really matters against the flow and rhythm of everything else that is happening in any given moment. So that mindfulness is really about figuring out how it is that we remember what matters while everyone else is telling us this is the thing that you should be paying attention to. So that in moment to moment that our awareness arises and it reflects upon the external information we're receiving and the internal lives, that inner life that you talked about, that is so important to us, that more and more of us are less conversant with, because we have so many external things that are drawing on our attention that we have forgotten how to have the conversations with ourselves on an ongoing and regular basis that allows us to take the enormous leap to commit ourselves to our individual, unique truth in the face of and in the presence of the universal truths that govern all of the lives that we live. So this is what it means to live into a radical Dharma, which is to figure out that sweet spot in between the universal truths and the unique truth, the unique essence, the presence that you are, the gift you are, that allows all of the universal truths that we all have to live by to be actually something that matters to us all collectively. That is to say that if you don't express your unique individual truth, all we've got is this singular set of ideas that we are going to be born, we are going to have lives in which we experience pain, challenge, and then we're going to die. The mattering comes from the fact of all of our individual unique expressions, that we have an opportunity to have contact with all of these people that give this ordinary set of truths that we could just say, okay, game over, this is what's going to happen, and then it's all going to be done. It's what actually gives the stuff in between meaning, that I have the opportunity to be in relationship and in contact with each and every one of you. And as a result of that, and I think that this is somewhat new as an understanding on the planet, that my contact with each and every single one of you is actually a window into my deeper truth. That it's not just this sort of curiosity-seeking place in which by coming into contact with you, I find out all sorts of different things about you, but actually by coming into contact with you, when you do your job of your radical dharma, then I am enabled, I am empowered, I am given the opportunity to understand more completely, more radically, my truth. And when we understand it this way, we realize how much we are suppressing the possibility of every single one of us when we suppress the individuality, the unique expression of any single one of us. When we commit to the notion that the only way I actually understand, my unique truth is by coming into contact with the complexity of your unique truth. Because if we all live by these universal truths, the only thing that ultimately matters is the stuff in between, and how it is that we express the stuff in between. So the way that I started to think about mindfulness is actually, it is a process of forgetting in order to remember. It is a process of forgetting all of the boxes, all of the labels. It's about forgetting what anyone ever told you about how the world is supposed to operate. It's forgetting anything anyone ever told you about what those people are like. Those queer people, those gay people, those Muslim people, those less able people, those neurodivergent people, those messy people, the ones that don't notice clutter, those inattentive people, those white people, those black people, those South Asians, those people across the country, those people down in the South, those people way back east, all of those people, if we are forgetting everything that we've ever been told about them, what we end up with is having to forget. In the process of forgetting what we've been told, we end up with the process of remembering who we are simply in relationship with all of the difference that we come in contact with, because we find these moments of resonance. So we forget everything we've been told about how life works and what the world is. We forget everything we've been told about each other. We forget everything we know about ourselves. And only in this way do we discover who we truly, uniquely are. This is our radical dharma. And if each of you forget to do your work, I'm reminded of discovering your own radical dharma, I feel robbed then about understanding something about myself, because if all you do is reflect me just as I am in this given moment, my limits are present in front of me. There's no more opportunity. There's no more things to respond to. There are no more ways to grow. There are no more ways to keep undoing the things that I thought I had already done. So I'm inspired then to call everyone into living into their radical dharma, because your radical dharma, not altruistically, it's because your radical dharma is my radical dharma. Your truth is my truth. It's not just that it's different, it's the difference through which I discover the singularity, the single particularity that is me, when I understand that this is the way that you operate, I get to check in my little inventory and say, are these really my choices? Are these the set of limits by which I can live? Is this the limit upon which my creativity has to express itself? Or can I do something that's more the way that Janara does it? Can I think about things the more that Nidhi does? Can I actually express my truth in the way that Spider does, though those people are in this room? And they're entirely unique people, and each one of them are people that I have learned from and become more true to myself as a result of. So my Radical Dharma is not just about discovering my truth, it is naturally and organically about the impulse to discover and actually empower and encourage the truth in each and every single one of you. As a result of that, I'm not threatened by difference. I thrive on difference. As a result of that, I'm not concerned about having to be with people of like minds. I crave different minds. As a result of that, I have more and more possibility for ways of expressing and understanding who I am and how I be, for understanding my joy, for understanding my pain, for understanding my suffering, but understanding my possibility, my creativity. Every single one of you that I come into contact with, even the ones of you that says, how is that radical anyway? In that same way that touching that moment of pushback or resistance or reluctance expands my horizon so I can stand in front of each of you and dig deeper and get clearer and touch the truth of what I'm saying and how I'm saying it and the way that I want to share it even more. This is what Radical Dharma is. And through that process, one of the things that we did for the workshops and camps, we have Radical Dharma circles, conversations, camps, and connections that we run. And as a result of that, what we realized is that something was happening, that we would get into a room with a set of people and we would invite them into their Radical Dharma. And what they thought they were coming to do was to learn about race, to learn how to deal with other people that were dealing with race. And what they discovered is that they didn't themselves they never had an opportunity to understand how it is that race lived inside of them and where it came from, and to undo the stories that they had been told. And that when everybody was given an opportunity to touch into the stories that they had been given, and to choose to relinquish those stories, in fact, to choose to forget those stories, what happened is they remembered themselves, they remembered each other, they remembered their love, they remembered their connection before they were told what to think about race, before they were told what to think about Jews, before they were told what to think about any number of people that you could select. That what happened is we started to remember our sense of love for each other. We started to remember our curiosity. We started to remember that difference wasn't our enemy, that difference was actually what defined us. And that wasn't something that's just an aside that we could tolerate, but rather something that we could thrive from. This is something that we could actually choose to live into, not because it made us better people or we got to check the PC box and we quote unquote did our work, but because it made us better, whole people that is about being who we are. So we developed this framework, and I'm going to offer this framework to you all to think about whatever it is you're up to in the world, to start forgetting whatever you've been told so that you can remember the truth of who you are. We think about it like this. First, a contemplative approach. We say a contemplative approach, a lot of people here practice, but we say approach because it doesn't really matter to me how it is you enter into relationship with a reflection about how you see yourself, how you relate to yourself, and how you reclaim connection to the conversation with your own inner life. Some of us do that through meditation, some of us do it through yoga, some of us do it through all of those things, some of us do it through running, some of us do it through conversation. But however it is that you do it, to find an approach that allows you to slow down the unfolding moment before you so that you're able to give it your full attention, give it your full presence. That's all that it means, is to have a contemplative approach. To be willing to test anything, any response that arises you, and check it and say, is that really mine? Does it belong to this moment? Is it of this time, or does it belong to the past? Does it belong to a set of instructions that I was given unbeknownst to me? And am I carrying forward ideas, stories, histories, lies, myths, madness that was never mine to begin with? Embodied practice, because if our society has done nothing in order to commit us to systems of oppression, to systems of limitation, to systems that keep us disconnected from each other, that drive a wedge between us and our love and our joy and our possibility and our connection with ourselves, it disconnected us from our connection with our bodies. So embodied practice is about learning how to reconnect to how it is you feel in this body, in this place, in this time. And that's more difficult than you can actually imagine until you get to trying it. Mostly we've been relegated to living from here up. And the reason that I know that is true is because I not believe in my head, but I believe in the kind of bright faith that comes from the witness and the evidence of things. That our natural orientation in this so-called tribalism is to actually be curious about each other, to want to be connected, and to want to be compassionate. And so whenever that's not working, it's an indication that we're out of our bodies, which leads us to being out of our minds. So embodied practice is absolutely essential. And we have to walk a liberatory path. That is a path that is all about how do I liberate myself from the stories and the myths and the madness that is not mine. I like my own madness, thank you very much, and I'll keep that, my own myths and my own stories, but we have to do the work of liberating ourselves from the incarceration of a system that would bind us and wedge us away from each other, away from difference, that would somehow tell us that if we are stuck, if we keep with the people that are the same, that somehow that will keep us safe. That if we stay with people that are the same, that will keep us safe. And all it does is actually shrink us down into fewer and fewer possibilities, because the less we are able to be in contact with this wildly chaotic difference, the less and less possible it is for us to get that little ping, that little moment of resonance that says, wait a minute, I think you've got something for me. I'm not going to become you, I'm going to become more of me. So a liberatory path is absolutely essential, to make the choice, to make the decision, to decide that liberation is what I'm about. And everything that comes along with it, I'm willing to take on for the sake of being free and freeing myself from anything that disconnects me from the truth of who I am, and to link arm in arm, as Janara did with the people that she met, to link arm in arm with the other people that are coming into the awareness. They don't have to be fully formed, perfect human beings. In fact, it's much better when they're not. The other ones, we want to just go put them back in their Stepford box and continue on our way. That we link arm in arm and we commit to liberation for those people as well, because it is their liberation that gives us the potential for us to continue to walk on our path, so that all of us can choose to be here together. Because eventually we find all of our arms, through the magic and miracle of intersectionality, we find that all of our arms will eventually link to one another's. So a liberatory path. This one is pretty tricky and fun. It's prophetic practice, prophetic praxis. That means, in the way that we hold it, to recognize that at any given moment, when we are not speaking our truth, we are living in the past. That we are stuck in previously conceived ideas about how things are and ought to be. So whenever we are living at the edges of our truth, naming it and reclaiming it, what is happening is that we are stuck in the past. So we suggest the idea that prophecy is somehow about the future. It's actually about the now. So when we speak into the future, what we are talking about is actually the present, and it gives us an opportunity to escape the shackles of the past. And finally, collective process, because of a quote that's attributed to me most often is that without collective change, no change matters. We can't arise in a vacuum of just a singular truth. At the end of the day, we forget and we remember who we are in our singular, unique truth, in the presence of these collective truths that make everything that we know about who we are and how we relate matter. Thank you so much.